So I'm sure some of you are curious as to what I think of the latest trailers for these guys. Really quick sum up starting with Ninja Turtles. I already said stuff about this film around a year ago, and now that I've seen the trailer, my thoughts haven't really changed. It still looks like the Transformers films, but instead it's the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. While the one gag in the whole thing actually made me chuckle a bit, how on earth have the visual effects department for this film managed to make the Turtles look just as cartoonishly CGI as they looked in the computer animated movie back in 2007? And I also don't think I've quite yet wrapped my brain around the decision to cast Megan Fox as April O'Neil. It's such a comedic concept that actually doing it and being a real thing that's actually happening turns out to be a lot less funny and a lot more painful than I thought. Days of Future Past. I really liked it. A huge improvement on the first one. It explained what's going on for those that don't know prior. Wolverine looks like a player in this film as opposed to the central focus, which is instead looking to be Xavier and Magneto, which is fine by me. More Stewart, McKellen, McAvoy and Fassbender can only make the movie better, and it's also great to see some completed visual effects for the first time. This looks like the first X-Men movie to have a big scope and some proper spectacle. And is that Iceman in full-on ice mode? Awesome! Yeah, I'm pumped for this movie. What of it? Huh. Anyway, what did I come here for? Oh, yeah. The Need for Speed review. And I was having such fun talking about X-Men. There's an entire thesis I could write on why 2014 is the worst possible time that Need for Speed could have come out. Forgetting that it's simply a bad, boring movie, Hollywood started putting into production films like this well over 10 years ago, and those were very similar to the racing games of the late 90s, one of which being Need for Speed. Now as this film comes out, there have been 6 Fast and Furious flicks with a 7th now on its way. You guys really couldn't have chosen a worse time to put this out. Because of that huge new hook for the Fast and Furious franchise now having died down, all this does is come across as a generic ripoff. But then again, I can only imagine that had the Fast and Furious films not come out yet, they wouldn't even have attempted this, considering Need for Speed desperately wants to be Fast and Furious. But it's kind of worse than that. You see, the Fast and Furious franchise actually got smart down the road and expanded into more than simply one kind of film. Despite having a distinct self-awareness with a unique tone and style, they developed into action movies as opposed to just racing movies. No longer does the tension in the action sequences come from one car getting a little further in front of another car and then another car getting a little further in front of that car and winning a race, because that's pretty darn boring. Now we have characters getting into fights in a tube station and people jumping around the place in the middle of a highway. That's quite fun. And while they admittedly come off to me as uninteresting flicks with dull characters just lurching from set piece to set piece, the action always seems to get me. And the filmmakers know this. They know that you didn't come to see engaging characters or intriguing plot points, you came to see fast cars going boom. And that's exactly what they're gonna give you. Are they my kind of films? Not really, I'm not a cars guy. But expanding into full-on action movies to reach a wider demographic was actually a very smart move, and that's why most people still manage to get some enjoyment out of them. You may have noticed that I've been going on and on about every movie but Need for Speed, even though I went on about the Fast and Furious films for a reason, but it's because there's really nothing interesting to say about Need for Speed. It's not great, it's also not terrible, it's just not very good. As others would say, I almost wish it were worse, just so that it would at least be interesting to talk about. The movie's biggest flaw is that people will only go to see this to see fast cars going boom. That's it, but it can't even deliver in that arena. The extent of the tension in these action sequences quite literally are cars getting a little further in front of each other. If I wanted to see that, I could have simply tuned into Formula 1. I can't even figure out who they thought this movie was for. The tacked on romance is unbelievably seen it all before that even if any guys did manage to get their girlfriends to come see this with them, they'll recognise this as the laziest written romance since Twilight. The characters are either not interesting, really interesting but not in any way memorable, or so obviously lovable that the only direction for them to go in is death to give our main hero a revenge motive, and the action is so lame that it's not even going to appeal to the guys that came to see what they'd otherwise get in a Fast and Furious film. I suppose car enthusiasts may get something out of it, but the passion for cars and driving plays such a small role in the context of the entire film's overly complicated plot that you may as well just be watching a car enthusiast show on TV. The only slightly original thing that attempts to grab you is the personal rivalry between Aaron Paul and the bad guy played by Dominic Cooper. After a race between the two of them and Paul's friend, the aforementioned lovable character, Cooper bumps the guy, causing him to tumble over and burst into flames, resulting in his death. Cooper keeps on driving and never confesses to being present at the scene, so Paul gets arrested for a couple of years. Now he's out and he wants revenge. By beating him in a race! Okay then. Did it ever occur to this guy that maybe racing got his friend killed? I don't even think I should get started on how much of an idiot our main character is. There's even a point in the film where he actually gets a hold of the evidence to prove that Cooper killed his friend, yet he still insists on racing him for the sole reason of we need one last racing duel. I know that these films don't care about the moral grey areas caused by the douchebags we're meant to be rooting for racing in the middle of the streets, and in almost all cases you're not meant to think about it because the movie isn't thinking about it, but the problem here is, Aaron Paul's motivation comes from the concept of driving onwards and leaving your opponent to die after he's crashed. And then it even goes so far as to recycle the final race scene from Cars, where the hero stops before winning the race to turn around and make sure the other guy is okay, which is meant to make us think he's a true hero by not allowing the bad guy to die, or it would do if he hadn't caused about 50 car accidents just trying to get to this race. Then there's this actress, she really needs to start being in better movies. I have a feeling she can only play one type of character, and it's always the confident, self-assured, but also damsel in distress borefest of a character. There's really not much to say about her besides, British people do not talk like the fucking Queen. Michael Keaton has a minor role as a racing commentator podcast guy, and only does a decent job because Keaton always brings that slightly manic performance to everything he does. And it would not shock me in the slightest to learn that he's getting a little fed up of being the exposition wizard in all of his latest films. I'd like to say that the one upside to the film was that it was a bit better than I thought it would be, since I went in expecting to hate it, but in turning out that way, it just kind of made things worse. There's one word ringing in my head when I think about this movie, and it's just dull. A pure, unadulterated, mediocre couple of hours. Do you like cars racing? Do you like Aaron Paul? Do you like beautiful women with awful fake British accents? Need for Speed is the film for you. Cheers for watching guys, and as always if you like this video, you can subscribe to my channel.